Hello, I'm Dale Petrock. Over the last few days, one of the things that's come to my attention is an interest in figuring out what's more useful to me in terms of shooting, using 10 shot groups or using 5 shot groups. There's been some discussions online, arguments at times about which of those is better and whether they're statistically valid and all those kind of things. Quite honestly, I rarely see statistics, so I don't perceive that as something that's really useful. The question is, which tends to be more diagnostic and what's the value of each? And so what I did is I have a set of pellets that are somewhat been inconsistent, and so I wanted to get a sense of what each approach might tell me about whether it was the gun, the pellets, what the issue is. I'm shooting a Tx200 Mark III, which has been rebuilt stock, save the addition of a 3mm spacer in front of the top hat. It was rebuilt after about 15,000 to 20,000 projectiles going through it. It was shot pretty heavily for a year. I'm shooting AA field heavies that are 10.3 by marking. When I have sorted them to 10.4 grains, I sort to the 10th of a grain. They've been shooting about 800 feet per second, plus or minus, and depending on the day, and somewhere between 4 and 6 feet per second of standard deviation. So that the gun is in pretty good shape. It has a Vortec Diamondback 5 by 24 on it, 25, and it's what I've been using. I shot, in this case, off an Allen front rest with a protector front bag. I let some of the material out, so it's a soft front bag, and it sits on a rag to give it some more movement, potential to slide forward and back. The rear bag used is a number protector, number 13 rear. It also is a bit softer than comes from the factory, and towels are placed on it to allow freedom of movement as well. It was about 88 degrees. There was very little wind. I'm about 450 roughly feet above sea level in my current location. It was a good day to test the rifle and the pellets. And so what I did is took it out and shot first a series of 3 5-shot groups, then 2 series of 10 shot groups, 3 each, so 6 total 10-shot groups, and then finished out with another series of 3 5-shot groups. So it was 5 shot for 3, 10 shot for 6, 5 shot for 3, trying to balance out my fatigue of the process along the way. The projectiles I used here are from the factory 10.3 grain AA field heavies, weight sorted, in this case to 10.3. All of them are supposed to have a nominal head size of 4.52. The 10.3s have not felt as consistent in terms of head space. Some are very loose, some are very tight. Much less consistent than some of the others that I have in that particular kind of pellet historically. These were not lubricated, although in some cases I do lubricate. These were unlubricated pellets along the way. The things that I learned, and I'll have the pictures in the upper corner here. Things that I learned. With the 10-shot groups, the group sizes tend to be about 1.5 to 1.7 times bigger. So if you were about half an inch with a 5-shot group, you're likely to be about an inch with a 10-shot group. It's my experience, and that's what I saw here. To me, the 10-shot groups give a better picture of the consistency. I use a standard, either 1 inch, or I use a quarter as a reference and see how many would be covered out of the 10 shots, with it giving me a sense of how consistent over a shot string it might be. And the downside is it uses more ammo. Obviously, I'm using 30 versus 15 rounds when I am checking ammo with this method. Now, the upside is that it allows, like I say, me to understand the consistency better. But one of the things that becomes a trick is someone has said to me recently, well, what about chronograph? Well, the problem I have had with chronograph readings is that the rifle can cause erratic chronograph readings, and the pellets can cause erratic chronograph readings, depending on whether the pellet is the issue or the rifle. So the chronograph by itself doesn't help me a lot making that final determination. 5-shot groups are much more commonly used. They sound better when you report them. You'll see group sizes here of around 0.5 to or under 0.5 in some cases. And you will see that they use less ammo. But the problem I have with 5-shot groups is that the point of impact for each of the 5-shot groups can move around. So, for example, with one of them, this is the 5-shot group. You'll see this one is pretty parallel, this one is high, and this one is low. And so while each one is fairly consistent in terms of the process, we have a 0.70, 0.59, and a minus the flyer of 0.76. If you were to combine these, they would be much larger. And so the 5-shot groups tend to obscure some of that kind of variation in the process. You see that same thing with the second kind of 5-shot group. Although they are much more typically aligned, you'll see again that process. Both of them, for the 10 and the 5-shot group, showed essentially two flyers, one here and one here. And we see that same kind of thing show up with the 10-shot groups. We have one here, and we have one here. So we've got the same kind of issue show up. Now the question becomes at the end of both of those, which is the cause? Is it the rifle? Is it the scope? Is it the conditions? Is it the shooter? And I don't think the 5 and 10-shot groups by itself will lend yourself to being able to answer that question clearly. So what I did is post hoc. The next day I went back out with a set of pellets that I knew how they performed, and the 10.3s I was using in this particular case that have had some history of inconsistency. And so I shot 6 5-shot groups in the upper half here with the 10.3s, and you'll see that there's two really strange variations that show up. And then I took a second batch that I knew were very, very consistent pellets. They're both AA 10.3 field heavies, but this one's sorted to 10.5 and comes from a different batch that has less inconsistencies in terms of size. And what you see is there's no real flyers here, or the closest we come is this one to being a flyer, with one of the groups being actually under half an inch at 50 yards. So in this particular case, it appears to me that the variations are likely due to ammo, and both the 5-shot and the 10-shot groups would have identified there was an issue, and it wasn't, and neither one would kind of lend itself directly to being able to point out what that issue was. It required some post-testing to determine that. So both have the ability to kind of be diagnostic. Both can give me some information. Both provide me with an understanding of how consistent a pellet is. But the 10-shot is going to give me a better sense of, if I'm in a competition, for example, where I'm going to have to run a string of 25 shots, what my consistency is going to be like compared to the 5-shot, which is going to underestimate the variation to some extent. Now, your experience may be different, and feel free to kind of comment on that. If there's any questions, also let me know. Otherwise, may all your shots be X's, and have a great day.